No. Right, that video. I kind of wish I'd embedded the video so you could actually watch it. Right. Do you all know what Laracasts is, at least? Only Laravel users here. OK, actually, hardly any hands went up. For those of you who don't know, Laravel is where most PHP code is written today. That's not in WordPress or Drupal or Joomla. Laravel is by far the most popular framework. It's more popular than all the other frameworks put together and stacked on top of each other many times. It's the equivalent of Ruby on Rails for PHP these days. Worldwide, it is being used enormously. And one of the reasons behind that is they have an amazing online community providing help and advice of how to get the most out of Laravel. Laravel tends to be adopted by people who need a little bit extra help. Like Ruby on Rails, Laravel is what they call opinionated. There is a right way to do things in Laravel. That's what they built their success on. And if you do things the Laravel way, success comes easy. You write and ship applications far quicker than you would using other frameworks. And if you're someone at the start of your experience, that's really helpful. And Laracasts is one part of that community. And I don't know how many videos are free and how many they sell. This one was free. I believe most of the videos are paid videos. You have to buy them. I don't know if it's a subscription or whether you buy the videos one at a time. But this is the big training site for online for Laravel. And they put lots of videos up. And a few weeks ago, they put up a video called Visual Det. And in that video, they took a class with types in and interfaces, etc. And they stripped it all out, right down. They stripped out public, protected, private, right down to the barest minimum. You had a class name, then you had function, and then a signature with no type hints. Barest minimum. And they said they were removing this because all this extra stuff was a visual det. It caused problems, in their opinion. And they were recommending you could at least consider removing it. They weren't saying it's all crap, it's all got to go. Let's be clear about that. They weren't saying this is the right way to do things. They were saying is maybe you don't need them. That's the message. It was a maybe, not a you must. And that's important to note when you look at people's reactions online. Someone mentioned Reddit. I mean, Reddit's not the place to go for balanced debate anyway, is it? But the things on there, I imagine, were very heated indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say about that video, these people aren't idiots. They're not stupid. They're not malicious. They must have done it for a good reason, a reason that they believed in at that time. Any ideas why they may have said it? Has anyone thought about doing something similar themselves? Not actually releasing a video, but doing that kind of thing of stripping back these things. Anyone found these things a problem?
Is it maybe because of the Laravel way, it might, like, it wouldn't cause as many problems because you follow their way?
They didn't mention that, no. I don't use Laravel, so I don't know whether there is a genuine problem there or not.
So they've got an ethos of like a really fast turnover, and so dear sort of building up a long-term thing is.
I don't know. Again, that's not something they really talked about. So my theory is, because if you look at the tips, what are they doing? They're making less code is less to hold in your head. It's less to think about. It's less to reason about. And Laravel is popular amongst people who, in general, need that extra bit of helping hand to help them get their code out the door. They're not. I was going to say they're not hardcore hackers or anything, but that's probably a little unfair. But they are people for who coding is a means to an end at best. It's not a discipline that they're into necessarily. They don't care. They're not motivated about the engineering. What they want to do is ship a website and move on to the next thing. So if you reduce the amount someone's got to know and understand in their head, that must reduce the amount of load on a new programmer who's, I don't know about you, but it took me 5 or 6 years to get my head around OO programming. And when I started OO programming, I've been programming for 12, 14 years. It still took me a while. I even wrote my final year thesis was on OO programming and how it compares to normal programming. And it still took me 5 or 6 years to get my head around it. My programming style in OO still changes even after all this time as well. So it must have been attractive to people. But hopefully this talk has convinced you it's not a good idea, because it cuts out all these things that help you when your happy path has problems. Yeah. The practices I've talked about today, I've been using some of these all the way back 20 odd years. I consider them proven, effective, repeatable in multiple different circumstances. Repeatable success, that's how I consider them. So, but they're not just removing robustness things, they're removing things like catch correctness problems as well. It's stripping everything down. I mean, if you can't, you're removing interfaces, etc. You don't know what you're calling at all. You're not guiding people to have the right object there in the first place. You're letting anything be passed anywhere. You're going back to the days of no scope. You could argue you're going back to a WordPress-like environment. And whatever the success of WordPress, it has come with a cost. And that cost is the amount of websites that have to scramble every time there's a WordPress release out to update, to pick up all the latest security bugs before they start being hacked and exploited by the script kiddies. If this stuff, if you don't do this robustness stuff, it comes with a cost. But if you're doing small disposable apps, and Laravel developers may well be because of their nature and the type of people Laravel appeals to, it may not matter as much. They may not see these problems. I mentioned I didn't do OO until about 12, 14 years after I started programming. I didn't see many of these problems for the first few years of my programming at all. Just getting the bloody thing to run without crashing the computer and having to reboot it was my challenge. These kind of problems were off in the stratosphere when I first started. So I've got sympathy with where they may be coming from. You get into a larger system or a longer lived project, these problems are going to appear. Stripping out types and all the rest of it, you are digging a hole for yourself on larger systems. You really are. Now, the thing about larger systems is different people have to work together. Yeah? That is an imperfect thing because you're not just doing computer science at that point, you're doing human relations and all the rest of it. And the people who've got to work together may not even get to talk to each other. If you're using someone else's open source code and you're submitting bugs, etc., you're leaving messages for them. Are you really having a conversation? Probably not in real time unless you catch them on Slack or IRC. So it's an imperfect world. You need all these things to help you because your happy path is threatened. The thing about longer lived projects is the code can outlive the developers. Code lives longer than most people realize. I mentioned the MOT project earlier on. That had been running several years. People came, people went. When it went live, not every developer who'd contributed to that code was there. In fact, most of them had left by that point because projects ramp up and then they ramp down as they get near a release, and you need that less effort, that less push. So longer-lived projects, they've got to survive change. And they've got to be resilient because change is going to happen. We talk about code rotting. Has anyone heard that phrase, that code rots? Even though you don't change the code itself. Yeah. Change happens whether or not you're changing that line of code or not, because code doesn't exist in a vacuum. It executes in a system, in a context, and that context can be under other people's control. And sometimes it can be quite a random situation at scale. And the thing with resilience, it doesn't happen accidentally, because resilience is everything that's off the happy path. Hopefully I've convinced everybody that if all you've got is your happy path, you haven't got resilient code, and one day you're going to have problems. Hopefully I've convinced you on that. And when you scale these things up, you start to get into problems. Outages cost time. You have to pay someone to fix them. And if it ends up in the press, which it can happen on larger systems, I've seen that happen, it affects the amount of people who are willing to do business with you or interact with your organization at all, if you're doing commercial work. And obviously, if you're a supplier supplying work to somebody else, you supplied a piece of code, you've left, and then it all goes pear-shaped, what are they going to think about you? They're not going to want to give you more work, are they? They're not going to want to recommend you to other clients, other customers. If anyone asks them for a reference, then they go, oh, don't touch him. Look at how much I've spent fixing his code. Yep, you've got to be careful with these things. But it's all about balance. I've created zero defect code. I've been there, I've done it. There hasn't been a production defect reported against NQS for 17 years now. The only way we could afford it was to spread it out over a huge amount of time, and not all that time was actually paid for in the end. to get it done. In today's modern environment, no matter how much money you've got, I don't care if you're Google, I don't care if you're Twitter, I don't care if you're Facebook, you still can't afford it. Even if you've got the money, you've still got deadlines to hit because you don't want someone else to steal the users before you get your feature out. So it's all about balance. You can't do 100% zero defect code these days. It's just not a commercial reality. But you can come close. And that's my advert for next month in Glasgow. I'm going to go over and I'm going to be talking about code coverage, what 100% code coverage means, how it's not enough, and what you've got to do beyond then. And it's a follow-on to this talk. So, thank you very much. That's it. So, you've